Hi guys, welcome back to Reserved Investments on YouTube. So, today we're going to get in our DeLorean time machine and we're going to go back to the year 1993. Okay? You can probably see by the title of this video what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to set the stage for discussing both the Pokemon collectible trading card game and also Magic the Gathering, and also where I see the markets where they're at in 2019 and where I predict they're going to go in the near future. Okay? So there's going to be more than one video done on these two collecting categories because there's no way I can talk about all the factors and the subsets of the various markets that make up Magic the Gathering and or Pokemon in one video. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to start discussing Magic the Gathering. Okay? Pokemon will be done in a separate video, and also it'll be more than one video. And the reason why, guys, if you're wondering, like, if you wanted to collect, speculate, or invest in something like Magic the Gathering, you have tons of choices. Let me explain. Just, if we look at the Magic the Gathering market as a whole, okay? If we were to break that down in all the possibilities of certain subsets of that particular market that you could possibly speculate and or attempt to, quote-unquote, invest in, we would be looking at reserve list cards, graded reserve list cards, meaning the higher end stuff, your PSA 9s, your PSA 10s, your BGS 9s, your BGS 9.5 quads, items of that high caliber. Also, we would be looking at vintage factory sealed booster boxes. If you want to get speculative, modern era booster boxes, and also specialty products. Then on top of that, the one that also everybody misses seems to be original artwork from the coveted vintage era of Magic the Gathering. So there's several different ways for somebody to go about either, quote-unquote, attempting to invest or speculate in Magic the Gathering. Same thing with Pokemon. Pokemon doesn't have as many facets as the Magic the Gathering marketplace does, but hear me out. If you wanted to attempt to invest in Pokemon, you could go after vintage factory seal booster boxes. If you wanted to speculate, you could speculate on modern era mass-produced product, which I would never recommend. You could also buy higher grade, third-party graded cards from the coveted era, meaning like your first edition base set, Charizard, holofoil card in PSA 10 or PSA 9. You could also go after, if you wanted to, in both markets, if you were really, really risky and you didn't mind throwing money away, you could attempt to speculate on modern mass-produced cards, which is a nightmare. I will do a separate video on that particular topic in regards to Magic the Gathering because I do want to touch on present-day MTG finance, but I am going to do that separately, guys. I think that needs to be dealt with on its own, completely, outside of the scope of these videos that I have planned for this segment. So, I'm going to take you back to 1993, and if you're wondering why we're going back to 1993, it's the year, obviously, that Magic the Gathering came on the scene with the very first set, which was known as the Alpha Edition, okay? So, I want to set the stage for what was occurring back in 1993. I'm not going to go into politics, news, sports, whatever. Don't care. What I am going to tell you is, though, if you were to walk in to a video game store back in 1993, okay, so most likely if this was at your local mall, it would either be an electronics boutique store, a software etc. store, or a Babbage's. One of those three pretty much ran the gamut of what was available in regards to mall-based retailers that catered to video games, okay? GameStop, for those of you unaware, GameStop would come out of the ashes of pretty much all three of those retailers combined because a lot of the companies that formed up what GameStop became through mergers and acquisitions was pretty much out of those companies. That's why, this is going to go a little bit off topic here, guys, but that's why I get upset when a lot of YouTubers praise Electronics Boutique and Babbage's, but then they always insult GameStop in 2019, 2020. You cannot insult one and not insult the other. GameStop copied a lot of their business practices from Electronics Boutique back in the day. Electronics Boutique did the same things that GameStop does today. It's just people who are nostalgic about the past always tend to forget about the negative things and only remember the good things, okay? It's just like if you're in a relationship with a woman and she breaks your heart. You miss her, right? But what do you think about in your mind? You replay all the good times you had with her. You don't think about all the bad times, all the times that she was passive aggressive and or disrespectful. It's human nature. We all do it. That's a big point of what nostalgia is. Nostalgia is pretty much remembering the past with a fondness for it. Believe me, if you look back at your childhood, I'm sure there's things that you're really attracted to or attached to, and you want to go back and experience those things. But there's also, I'm sure, there's a lot of painful memories back there. Nostalgia seems to work on focusing only on the good aspects of the past. We always sometimes forget the pain in that regard. And that's a good thing about human nature. That said, when we go back to 1993, okay, if you were to walk into one of those game stores that I mentioned, this is what you would see on the shelf. You would see Super Nintendo games, Sega Genesis games, Sega CD games, because the Sega CD launched in 1992, roughly a year before, TurboGrafx and Turbo Duo games, possibly, depending on where the store is located, Neo Geo games, and also original Nintendo games. Now, I will be fair. The original Nintendo section back in 1993 was not as relevant as it was, say, in 1989 or 1990 or 1991. But there were still games being sold at a lot of these stores because so many people own Nintendo systems, it just made sense to stock a lot of the discounted stuff that was falling out of flavor or stuff that was overproduced that was still in the distributor pipeline, okay? Now, let's talk what else was happening in 1993 before we talk about Magic the Gathering. If you were involved in the greater collectibles trade and you are a modern era speculator, this is what you were buying back in 1993. And you guys let me know how this panned out, I should say, for the speculators that were engaging in this type of activity. Back in 1993, this is what people were speculating on. Factory sealed cases, not booster boxes. Factory sealed cases. We're talking 6 to 10 booster boxes to each case of baseball cards made by Donruss, Flair, Topps. So how much are baseball cards from 1993 worth, even if they're factory sealed? Okay, I can answer that for you. They're worth a lot less than what they sold for back in 1993. Here's another subset of the trade that people were speculating on. If you guys wonder why I'm so negative towards speculation of modern mass-produced collectibles. Modern era comic books at the time entered a speculative bubble at this time frame, meaning 1993. People were buying up all these variant, Holly foil, stupid reissued #1 issues from companies like Mirage, Valiant, DC, Marvel, all these fly-by-night companies that released issues that have no relevance in 2019, okay? Even a lot of the stuff made by Marvel and DC is pretty much worthless from this time period. Yes, there are some exceptions. First appearance of Deadpool appeared at this time. First appearance of Venom, Amazing Spider-Man 300. But the people that bought those books also spent hundreds, if not thousands, on the books that are now worthless today. So speculation in the comic book marketplace at this time was pretty much dead money if you were doing it. Here's another collectible that was popular in 1993. Beanie Babies and Pogs. Both these items started their incline into the greater collectibles marketplace where a lot of people would be burned badly. And guys, one thing about speculation, why we're on this topic, I really got to let you guys know this. One of the problems with speculation is when somebody gets burnt bad with a speculative bubble in the collectibles marketplace, you want to know what happens? They tend to stop collecting altogether, okay? That's very bad for the market as a whole because collectors are born. They're not made. The person who's going to go out there and collect coins or comic books or video games or baseball cards or even Magic the Gathering is a different breed than the average person who has a liking for some of this stuff but doesn't actively pursue it in a form of collecting it, investing in it, and speculating in it, okay? So speculation is a necessary evil in the greater antiques and collectibles trade. I've said this before. The problem is, though, the people who engage in it put themselves at risk for turning sour towards the income and or investment potential of the greater antiques and collectibles trade if they ever get burned. And that's sad, in my opinion, okay? Speculation causes a lot of collectors to lose passion, and that can be very negative for the trade going forward, okay? Enough said on that. So, you may be wondering why I'm setting this video up this way to talk about Magic the Gathering. Well, here you go. When Magic the Gathering was released in store shelves back in 1993 with the very first set, the Alpha set, very few people bought it. Very few people knew what it was. The few retailers that carried it were more esoteric retailers like Electronics Boutique, Barnes & Noble. If you're wondering why Barnes & Noble would carry a product like Magic the Gathering, it makes perfect sense. Because a lot of people who play Dungeons & Dragons would go to a Barnes & Noble to buy either playbooks or other type of supplies that Barnes & Noble, Borders Books would all stock. So it made perfect sense as a crossover sales item for that type of store to carry Magic the Gathering and take a chance on. Now, there's one more thing that I want to talk about before we go back to Magic the Gathering so I can set the stage here. Back in 1993, if you were going to page through a vintage video game magazine, so we're talking about a video game magazine like Electronic Gaming Monthly, Game Pro, Die Hard Gamer. All these publications were readily sold at Electronics Boutique and also Barnes & Noble and Borders, of course. If you were to pick one up off the shelf and you were to start paging through it, this is what you're going to hear. You're going to see a lot of terms like interactive entertainment, CD-ROM explosion, multimedia boom. All these buzzwords that were looking forward into the realm of video games and interactive entertainment. There was a lot of hype at the marketplace level at this particular time for video games. In 1993, Trip Hawkins of Electronic Arts fame was ready to release the 3DO Real Interactive Multiplayer. A lot of the news outlets, I'm talking mainstream media, were reporting on the launch of the 3DO. They seriously thought that the 3DO was going to cause serious competition for Nintendo, for Sega, for a lot of the big video game companies at the time. Of course, looking back, we know the truth. The 3DO flopped, okay? It was an underpowered machine with much less capability than what was being hyped at the time, and it kind of fell flat on the market due to launching at a high retail price. So, why am I bringing that up when we're talking about Magic the Gathering? Well, it's quite simple. If you lived like me back in 1993, you were more excited about the field of video games and interactive entertainment than you were for a card game, okay, that was pretty traditional in nature. So you have to have that mindset to understand why today a factory sealed alpha starter deck sells for 5 figures or more on the marketplace, okay? Reason being is, back in 1993, Magic the Gathering, when it came out, wasn't even marketed properly. It wasn't hyped. There was very little advertising being done by the small startup company known as Wizards of the Coast at the time. Wizards of the Coast honestly didn't have a lot of money to throw behind it. So when Alpha premiered on store shelves, the people that bought it were already fairly strange birds and esoteric gamers at the time. A lot of mainstream gamers, video gamers, even people that played Dungeons and Dragons did not take a liking to Magic the Gathering right away, okay? Really, what caused Magic the Gathering to gain in popularity was word of mouth. So what happened was, Wizards of the Coast released the product. They did the alpha run, and they waited for it to sell out. Then they printed the beta run. They waited for it to sell out. And then when Unlimited came on the scene, that was when people started noticing the product, because now there's 3 different versions of the product that was released. Sales started picking up a little bit, and then finally by the time Revised came out, and also of course Arabian Nights, Antiquities, Legends, all these earlier sets, a player base was massively starting to form. And basically what happened was Magic caught on by word of mouth, okay? You have to understand that. That's why today, when I look back and I see what was being speculated on back in the 1990s, the 1980s, even the late 1970s, all the speculators throughout history have been wrong in the greater antiques and collectibles trade. Very few got it right. Those that did and were able to put the product away for when the time was right, if they sold at the right time, they made money. However, in order to have those 2 things, the right product and know when to sell, that's the akin of lightning hitting you twice. It just doesn't happen. That's why I say, guys, when I launched this channel, I'm doing this channel to try to teach people fundamentals in analyzing markets in not only the greater antiques and collectibles trade, but also financial markets as a whole, okay? There's a crossover effect. The people that are successful investing in antiques and collectibles are usually also extremely successful at the stock market, bond market, any of your financial markets. There's a crossover there, okay? Also, these people, as I've said before, and you've heard me say this, these people also understand the fundamentals of economics. They know supply versus demand. That's why you don't see people like me filling up my house with 12 of these wonderful Ultimate Collector's Series, Boba Fett Slave 1 Lego sets, because now everybody's buying this stuff, okay? And they're not just buying one. They're buying 10 of these. I know people buying 20 of these, thinking they're going to be the next big thing. Usually when that happens, the bubble is ready to pop, okay? It's not a valid asset class to be held for even the short term, let alone the long term, okay? What makes Magic the Gathering different is back in 1993, speculators were not buying this product. They were buying Pokemon in 1999, and when we get to that video, I'll talk more about that. But Magic the Gathering, all the way up through, I want to say, 96, got away with very little speculation. Now, you can argue in 1995, when Ice Age came out, when Mirage was ready to hit, there were people buying up mass quantities of booster boxes, because those 2 sets, there's a lot of available product on the marketplace. Same thing with Fallen Empires. The thing about Fallen Empires, though, is, guys, it wasn't that they sold a lot of Fallen Empires. It was that they made a lot. A lot of distributors were stuck with Fallen Empires. I remember I worked in an electronics boutique store in 1995, okay, my senior year in high school. And I didn't get into Magic until 1995 because I discovered it through working at electronics boutique, ironically. Now, here's the kick. A lot of people were coming in who had bought in Fallen Empires, and they were very disappointed in the product. They said the play mechanics and the flavor just didn't give them the same feeling as Alpha, Beta, Unlimited, or even some of the earlier expansion sets. What really brought the people into Magic the Gathering was when Ice Age came out. Ice Age, and I love Ice Age, I'll be very honest. When Ice Age came out, that brought a lot of new people into the fold. But you have to understand, at that time, Magic the Gathering was already out for 2 years. 2 full years by the time Ice Age hit. So a lot of the people that went after the Alpha starter decks, the Beta starter decks, the unlimited booster boxes and sealed product, all that stuff was pretty much out of production by the time the mass frenzy of vintage Magic first hit. That's why if you search eBay, you search a lot of the auction sites, you see so many people with factory seal booster boxes of Ice Age, of Fallen Empires, of a lot of the more mass-produced sets. Homelands is a good example. That's not to say they're bad products. It's just so many people bought them and kept them factory sealed, and also Wizards of the Coast made so many of those products compared to Alpha, Beta, Unlimited, Legends, Arabian Nights, Antiquities, all those earlier coveted sets. okay? So when we look at the market, this is a good example and a good time to reflect on speculation. If you were a speculator back in 1993, I guarantee you there was a good chance you weren't putting away factory sealed alpha or beta Magic the Gathering starter decks. No, no, no. What you were speculating on was comic books, trading cards, and Beanie Babies, and or Pogs, because those were the four most popular speculative markets. If you want to do research, you want to check my math on this, I was there, I know, in the greater antiques and collectibles marketplace. Now, let's look to today, meaning 2019. How much of that stuff is worth money today? Modern era comic books from 1993, sports cards from 1993, Beanie Babies, and Pogs. I want to say roughly 90% of all that stuff is worthless, or worth less than what it was back in 1993. And if you're wondering why I'm saying 90%, guys, I've said this before. A lot of people get the markets wrong. Yes, very few people are collecting Beanie Babies today. That said, there are some Beanie Babies that are still worth money. It's less than 1 to 3% of the whole total market, but there are Beanie Babies out there that have value. To sit here and say that Beanie Babies are worthless across the board is not accurate, and it's not realistic. In fact, it's very dangerous, because if you're one of those people that ends up having one of those Beanie Babies that are in that 1 to 3% category that actually do sell for a premium on the secondary market, and you hear all Beanie Babies are worthless, well, guess what, guys? What are you going to do? You're going to get rid of your collection, and you're going to sell it at either a loss, or you're going to sell it at a price that's lower than what you could have got for it, okay? I'll tell you a tip. I know guys that go to flea markets and yard sales, and you want to know what they always look for when they go to flea markets and yard sales? They look through a box of Beanie Babies, because they're looking for the items that are put out there for a quarter or 50 cents a piece that actually still have value on the secondary market today. And some of those guys, they don't hit often, but when they do hit, they make $50, $100, almost several $100s at one time. So it is worth it to still look at Beanie Babies if you come across them, and you know which ones are valuable. That's just a side note, okay? That'll be done in another topic. I'm not going to go over the value of Beanie Babies in this video. Sorry. Back to Magic. So when we look at why in today, 2019, certain Magic the Gathering products are coveted and valuable, okay, compared to what they retailed for back in 1993, it's easy to see why. Nobody was speculating on this stuff back then, okay? When they started speculating on it is why you can still get an Ice Age booster box for what, $400, $500 a box, I think? It's Mirage that really went up in value. I made a lot of money selling factory sealed Mirage booster boxes for between $1,000 to $1,300 a box just this past year. I love Mirage. I also only paid about $300 for those boxes. So I'm happy to let them go at $700 to, almost $1,000 profit per box. I only had 10 boxes, guys. It wasn't like I had a lot, but I was very happy with the gains I made in that market. That said, this is the question that we get to, and this is the very first question everybody asks me. Sean, in your opinion, should anybody be investing in vintage Magic products in 2019? Well, in order to answer that, we got to look at the subsets of the markets that I presented in the first part of this video. Meaning if you come to me and you go, Sean, I just want to buy some factory sealed vintage booster boxes from what I call the coveted vintage era, but the later vintage era, meaning still reserve list cards, but sets like Tempest, Mirage, the expansion sets, obviously, for those sets like Visions, Weatherlight, Stronghold, Exodus. What's your opinion on them? I'm going to tell you. My opinion on the factory sealed booster boxes is a lot better than my opinion on the high-end graded reserve list cards, okay? If you wanted to invest in items like factory sealed Mirage booster boxes, Weatherlight, Visions, Tempest, Exodus, Stronghold, from that coveted era there, okay? You have to understand there's a lot of product on the market, okay? There's a lot of that stuff circulating out there. A lot of it is, I'm going to say this, a lot of those items are in what I call a minor speculative bubble because Magic the Gathering grew in value so quickly over the last 3 years. Okay? So if you're going to buy those items, you could do a lot worse, okay, than investing in something other than a sealed booster box of Mirage, a sealed booster box of Tempest. You just have to have the stamina to know, more likely than not, there's going to be some peaks and valleys in regards to Magic the Gathering collecting going forward. So if you pay $1,000 or $1,300 for a factory sealed box of Mirage today in 2019, maybe a year or two from now, it drops to $800 a box, okay? Well, maybe 5 years from now, it starts selling for $1,500 a box. You see what I mean? It's very speculative, and it's very hard to predict the market on that type of item. However, over the long term, assuming you bought a truly authentic factory seal booster box, I'm hoping that prices will go up in value on those items, assuming more collectors and players come into the game with a willingness to want to explore the game's history. That's key, guys, okay? You have to understand, Magic the Gathering is not 30 years old yet. That being said, if we go back to one of the earlier videos I did where I talked about Harry Rinker and his 30-year rule, where he says, for the first 30 years of anything's life, its value is speculative, you have to apply that to Magic the Gathering, and especially Pokemon, and also great at video games. More on that in another video. But you have to understand those markets are extremely speculative. So, do I recommend that you put all your money in vintage Magic the Gathering products? No, absolutely not. However, if you want to donate or park a portion of your collecting budget in that market, I honestly don't see anything wrong with it as long as you understand the risks. So, now let's talk about the other extreme of the market. I get asked this too. Sean, I can get a graded BGS 9 or 9.5 Alpha Edition Black Lotus. Should I buy it? Well, what's the cost? Well, it looks like I'm going to spend between $80,000 to $110,000 for the card. Do I think you should buy it? No. Here's why. I really think a lot of the graded higher-end Magic cards are in a little bit of a speculative bubble right now. Yes, I'm going to agree with you. Some can go higher, okay? Don't get me wrong. That Alpha Black Lotus may be worth $250,000 down the line. But here's the problem, and this is, again, what unsophisticated investors get wrong. There's a bigger chance that that item can fall in value 20 to 30% for the next 5, 10, or 15 years before it even starts to go up in value again. So this is what I'm going to ask you. If you're thinking of buying an Alpha Black Lotus in BGS 9.5, and let's say you're thinking of spending $100,000 on it, are you okay if you buy that particular card and it drops to $80,000 or $70,000 and it remains at that price level for the next 5 to 10 years? Are you okay with that? If your answer is no, do not buy that type of item. It's too speculative. You are parking too much of your assets in one collectible category. And I have another video coming up on diversification in the greater antiques and collectibles investing realm. That's going to be a much-watched video for a lot of you guys, because I keep seeing people that are doing incredibly stupid things. Like, I can't say this person's name, guys. I'm sorry. He's a client of mine, so it's confidential. There's a guy I know who is looking for a rocket-firing Boba Fett prototype figure in AFA 80, 85, or 90, okay? When I got talking to him, he has a net worth of $500,000. The problem is, $200,000 of that net worth is tied up in his primary residence. He has another $300,000, but $100,000 of that is tied up in a 401k. So really, he has $200,000 invested in the greater financial markets. He wants to take $100,000 of that money and park it into a rocket-firing Boba Fett prototype action figure. He asked me what my opinion is. I looked at him and I said, you're freaking nuts. Don't put that much money, 20% of your net worth, in one collectible and just think because it's quote-unquote rare or hot right now that it's always going to be sought after. Yes, there is a chance for an item like that to continually go up in value. The problem is, though, and this is what unsophisticated investors and speculators don't always think about, there's also a chance that that item drops in value to $80,000 or $70,000 for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, 30 years. What do you do then? You just lost 30% of your pretty much money in that realm, because if you go to sell it, now you got to sell it at a loss. Plus, keep in mind, collectible assets do not pay interest, dividends, long-term capital gains, all that good stuff that puts money in your pocket throughout your lifespan, okay? There's a lot to look at when you analyze these markets. So, my next video, I'm going to talk more about Magic the Gathering, and then we're going to get into talking about Pokemon, okay? This video is running at 30 minutes, okay? I didn't want to go too much long on this video because it would be over an hour, hour and a half video for me to talk about these markets directly in one shot, okay? It can't be done. For those of you that have subscribed to my channel, I thank you so much. For those of you that have left me feedback, comments in a productive manner, I thank you. If you are interested in learning more about investing and or speculating in collectibles, if you have a passion for this stuff, please consider subscribing. You can also read my articles I write for Antiques and Auction News every 2 weeks. Thank you guys, and have a great night. I love all of you.